And so on behalf of Kutandara, we are really excited. I don't know if John and Louise, you can understand how excited we are. We are really excited to have you. And even before we start the discussion, I really just want to say thank you. Number one, thank you for creating not only memory, but something special about Tuku. That's one of the only things we have remaining. Yes, there is the Pakare Paya Center. Yes, he has inspired many. Yes, we have musicians like me who would have not been in music if it wasn't for him. But for the general person, today showing that film was just incredible. I texted Amy saying, I'm crying. I was crying because of my personal feelings of Tuku, of who he was to me. He was a father figure. I was in the same class with Sam. So from high school at Prince Edward, Tuku was a father. I grew up in a family with no dad. I grew up with a single mom, and so when we do I'm sure you guys know about Prince Edward Jazz Band. When we do the different concerts at PE, he's the one who would stand as my father because I did not have one, and I grew up in a very special family that music was not a recognized thing in our society, in our community, and we're so far coming from a single mom. It was more like, you gotta be a lawyer, you gotta be a doctor, you gotta be this. And so most of the time, Tuku was the man who would stand as a father figure for me and as a parent. I know in so many spaces, in so many concerts that would play and parents would come, and after the show, everyone goes and sits with their parent for a meal. And I would end up going and sitting with Tuku because to me, he was family. So it was quite emotional for me to watch the film today. And I know so many other people that I shared the link with were just saying, we have something that we can carry and something that I think deserves to be in our archives, in our national historical places. And look at you, John and Louise, you are the people who have filmed two of the greatest, totally the greatest films of Oliver. And so as we start, I just want to really say thank you. We honor you. We appreciate you. And thank you for saying yes for us to premiere it on our platform during the festival. I can tell you backstories. Me and Amy, this has been one of our highlights. Yes, we would have loved to have the biggest artist with us, but we are glad that we could treasure this moment of Oliver because of the investment he put in Zimbabwe. And so thank you, moreover, for agreeing to be on the Zoom with us to share the story, um, for me, it's an educational lesson. I'm a content creator now. I'm doing a lot of filming for concerts, not extremely professional, but getting there because everything is now online. And so to have legends, living legends like you, we don't take it for granted. So thank you. And then to everybody who is here, feel free. This is an open discussion. I'm just going to get the ball rolling, but feel free to post in a question in our chat, or you can even just raise your hand and we'll be able to give you an opportunity. We have John and Louise. It's not every day that you get these two great people to spend an hour with us. So please do feel free to bang them with questions, and let's just have a good time as we share. 41 years of independence of Zimbabwe today. It's the actual day, 18 April, and we are super excited to be having all of you here. Thank you for supporting Kutandara the past 3 days. And so let's go. I think I would start with both of you. If you could just share with us your journey as film directors, not necessarily for Tuku, but in general, what has been your experience and how did it all start for you guys to go into film?
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll go way back. Yes.
Okay. Oh, well, in regards to Zimbabwe, I have just one sentence. We went to Zimbabwe to make the film for 6 months, and we stayed 17 years.
Oh!
We loved the place, and that's can tell you a lot. Just okay.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So just quick backstory quickly, because it put it in context. Louise and I were both born in India and raised there and finished high school there and spent pretty much the first 30 years of our lives in India, though we're Americans. We came back to the US after graduating high school together. We've known each other all of our lives. And then went back to India to make films. I studied filmmaking. Louise studied geography, but She started as a location sound person and then took over editing. And then our kids are also in the business now, so to speak. So we went back to India. We had an opportunity to go to Africa in '86. I went there with the idea of finding a place to make a film called Consequences, that you might remember. Blessing, it's a film of teenage pregnancy kind of film. So as Louise said, we went in 1987 to make a film on a 6-month basis, and we just could not leave. We found it so compelling, such a wonderful place. And after making Consequences, we were working in film at that time, by the way. It was 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter. And after that, we just got more and more work. And very early on, we worked with Oliver on the sound side of things. So the first really big film that we made was a film called Neria, which probably many of you have heard about. And that's where we really got to know Oliver well. He became quite a close friend of ours. So, I mean, that's the background quickly.
Okay.
If you want to hear specifically about these films, maybe.
Yeah, I think I would go in directly into the making of maybe already the one you've started. Maybe we can start with Neria. Just the making of it, the inspiration around it, and what was the experience with making a Zimbabwean film, Neria, and then we can move to Shanda after.
Okay. Well, I always wanted to make films really more specific. Yeah, some of the speakers on. I wanted to make films, kind of use the medium of film specifically for African audiences, rather than making films about Africa for Western European, North American audiences or whatever. So I think we basically felt that film could be used as an intervention, so to speak, or a tool to kind of focus people in a public discourse on issues like women's rights, for example. So with Neria, what happened is a young man by the name of Godwin Mawuru, who's late now, unfortunately, he came to us with an idea of wanting to make a film about a challenge that he had in his life when his mother was widowed, and what that meant in a cultural context. So we thought this would be a really good idea. We wanted to work in women's issues at the time, and so we made Neria. Godwin directed it. Part of our whole approach too was that we really wanted to work with African writers and directors, and we wanted to produce. We had the technical skills, the equipment, and things like that. So many of our early films, Neria, More Time, Everyone's Child, were directed by young Tanzanian.
Not Tanzanian, Zimbabwe.
Sorry, Zimbabwean. And then and then eventually Yellow Card was the film that I directed, Yellow Card, and it was, all of these films sort of dealt with social issues, HIV. A lot of our work, was around HIV, because HIV just emerged at that time, in the mid to late '80s, and we didn't so much deal with the medical or technical aspects of the virus or whatever. We were more interested in the social dimensions of how a pandemic like that could be addressed through looking at women's rights, for example, or youth, challenges of youth and adolescence and that kind of thing. So all of our dramas were really stories about people dealing with these issues on a social level rather than a clinical or medical.
Right.
John, I just want to jump in for 1 second because we have a good friend here who just joined us, and she is a filmmaker, and she stays here with us in the Boulder area in Colorado. She is the one who pointed us to you and to your films. This is Robin Truesdale. I just want to say thank you so much, Robin, for the work that you've done in filmmaking and for pointing us to John and Louise.
Oh, happy to do it. I'm a filmmaker's filmmaker. I always support my fellow filmmakers, and I love Shanda so much. I've seen it several times, and have also filmed in Zimbabwe and did a short film there many years ago. But I just appreciate you all so much. I wish I could stay online. I have another Zoom meeting actually that I accidentally coincided. So sorry.
All right. Yeah, I just glanced at your website actually when I got your name and stuff. I'll be looking at your work. Maybe we can talk later sometime.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Can I just add something to what John was saying about
Yes.
starting out with film in Zimbabwe? At that time in Zimbabwe, there was a lot of films being made, the kind of anti-apartheid films that were not allowed to be made in South Africa were being made in Zimbabwe. So there was a lot of crew members who had worked on big Hollywood films and had a lot of experience, but not really experience with responsible positions. So part of our whole approach there was also to, on a training thing with other filmmakers and crew members to give them more responsibility and more of their own stories.
Wow.
Yeah, so we came in a pool of, there was a pool of experienced talent in Zimbabwe. In fact, in '86, when I went to Africa for the first time from India, we went to 4 countries. We went to Kenya, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and Senegal, looking at the issue of teenage pregnancy, which the film Consequences covered, and looking at where we wanted to make this film. And Zimbabwe was the obvious choice for many reasons, including they had a fully functional film laboratory. I mean, we're talking just before video really took over, certainly. So we had a laboratory where we could do all the processing and the editing and completion work and that kind of thing. Plus we had, at the time, I think Richard Attenborough was shooting Cry Freedom. So when we arrived, we met a lot of people, that were working on that film. And I think, wow, here's the pool of talent, young people, young Zimbabweans working. And so that's where we decided to make this film. And that's where we ended up spending many years. Yeah.
Oh wow! I think that is one of the parts that's very special for me. That 6 months tend to be 17 years, and I think you achieved the goal, because one of the things that has been special in your films for sure is a message has been driven. When you watch Nelia, like it's very clear in your eyes what you're trying to bring out. Same thing when you watch Shanda, it was not going around the bush. It was very significant and straight. So I could definitely say, just as a normal viewer, that you really achieved the goal of your purpose, rather. I'd like to ask Louise this: what were some of your favorite moments in Zimbabwe?
Oh, geez.
2 or 3, maybe.
I have to say, making Shanda was definitely a highlight. It was just fantastic to go to all of the rural areas. Like we went to Oliver's home in the northeast, and we went to Highfields, the townships, and we were just like, and it just gave us a whole new experience, being able to go to the real rural parts of Zimbabwe with someone like Tuku, who everyone respected. And it was at a time when it was politically very difficult. So, we had a few little hairy moments, but that was one highlight. I think the other thing for me was it was such a fabulous place, and it's not a moment, but a fabulous place for bringing up our children.
Okay.
The schools were great. Our kids were in government schools. Their friends were all integrated. It was a completely integrated, you know, generation that my kids grew up in. And for them, it was home, and it's always been home, even after we left. So
Yeah, it was really is such a special place. And,
I miss it a lot.
When are you coming back?
Oh,
we might.
yeah, let's see what COVID happens, but
You're more than welcome. We've got a question from Mary. She's asking where she can access material like Consequences. Are they on an online platform somewhere she can be able to see or something?
Yeah, we have MFDI has a YouTube channel that has quite a lot of our stuff in English. We have another YouTube channel which is our Swahili content, because we moved in 2004, late 2004. We moved up to Tanzania.
Okay.
We were there for 15 years producing content in Swahili. So most of the content that we have is in Swahili. But Media for Development International, if you look that up on YouTube, you can find Niria, yeah, pretty much all of our feature films, maybe not Yellow Card and not Shanda. I don't know why, but we haven't posted that yet. So yeah, one thing about the story, one thing I want to make really clear, what happened, okay, let me build up to, I directed The Yellow Card, the only film that I directed there. And when I was in post-production doing the completion work down in Johannesburg, I used to go to the music scene down there quite a bit and meet up with Oliver. And Oliver kind of, and I were talking about, he wanted to explore the idea of making a film about his life. And his original idea was like a dramatic drama, because we specialize in drama. We make feature films. And I said, well, that would be really interesting. But the question is, where are we going to get the money for something like that? Because, in spite of what, how we're perceived as our successes, these films, every time you're trying to raise money to make any film, it's really not easy. It's, it doesn't matter how many films you've made, it's a real challenge. But at that time, I shortly after, I was traveling quite a bit with Yellow Card as a director. And I was going to film festivals, and I was seeing films like Buena Vista Social Club, for example, if you remember that, the film, Cuban music. Yeah. And it just dawned on me, there was another Brazilian film actually that was made, or Cuban actually, that was even like that, but simpler. It was real simple. And that's where I got this concept of making Shanda the way that we did. The idea was that, but it's Oliver's story. It's everything, it was Oliver's vision, really. I mean, as a filmmaker, we visualized it and all that. But I went to him and I said, look, rather than trying to get money to make a dramatic film very expensive, why don't you select 10 of your favorite songs, from your career. They don't need to be necessarily, well, for whatever reason, because they were commercially successful or they meant something very special to you on a personal level. And so that's what he did. I think we started off with 12. And I said, and then what we'll do is we will because we had no money for this film. We got a small loan of like $10,000 actually to make it. And that's what we made it with that. What we'll do is we'll cover those songs live, and we had a really good studio at the time. We took our Pro Tools equipment out, had good engineers, and we'll record in these locations, which, would be kind of rough and ready. Not a lot of lighting, not trying to make it a glitzy kind of thing, just making it like a real experience of what actually happens when you're on the road in Zimbabwe. Yeah. So we started in a glitzy kind of club, downtown at the time, which, we had plenty of lights and stuff. And then we moved to Highfields, and then we moved out to the rural areas. where his grandfather, his family is from. And what they did is they did their regular routine, but they included all of these songs in their routine that night. And then we recorded it. I hired 3 or 4 other cameramen. We used very small digital video cameras, but we had this fantastic sound recordings, to work with. And so that's kind of what we did. And then we interviewed him around the songs, why they were important to him. And what emerged was basically a bit of a history of the country in a way, because his career it's even a political kind of story in a way. His career began really in the mid-70s at the height of the liberation struggle. So a couple songs dealt with that, and then the celebration of independence, and then post-independence was kind of more his look at, social character. He liked sort of poking fun at Zimbabwean society and stuff, these characters and figures and stuff. And then HIV came along, and then that became a very big issue for him.
Yeah.
He got into trouble even for that, And then of course his faith, his Christian faith was also throughout really prominent kind of. And but then we just kind of wove a story. We managed to find some really good footage from the liberation struggle. We worked with Simon and Ingrid Bright, who shot the film Flame, about a woman fighters in the war. And then we just kind of, and then the other thing that I did is I just wander. I'd call him up and say, Oliver, what are you doing today? I just want to come with you and be with you. And that was a little more difficult, because the concerts were easy, but kind of getting access into his home and going shopping with him, or that kind of stuff was a little more difficult. But we shot a lot of footage, and then my wife Louise edited it, put it all together. So that was the story of the making of it. And then Bonnie Raitt, for you Americans here, who's a huge, musical phenomena here. She was a big fan of Oliver. She covered a couple of his songs. Hear Me Lord was one of them. And she caught wind of this. We knew someone at a festival, and she saw it and she said, oh my God, I love this film, and I'd love to host it. So next time they were touring America, the Black Spirits, she hosted a premiere in San Francisco, which was quite a highlight of our careers in a way. A lot of, American celebrities around and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Wow. Well, no, thank you for sharing the story in detail. I mean, we now know the backstory, because sometimes when you watch it and you get the backstory and you put it together, it makes even more sense. And for me, I'm like I told you, I'm just learning. So thank you for sharing that in detail. Someone also said in the chat they would like to know how you can tie Shanda to independence, looking at the time it was filmed, and of course today we're celebrating independence. What would be your comment around that film tied with the Zimbabwean independence?
Well, I mean, specifically because it actually, one of the songs that he picked was Zimbabwe, which was a celebration of independence. I think also how he supported the struggle. He was very, in a way that Oliver always was. He often got in trouble with political people, but they couldn't really nail him because he was such a loving, compassionate person that his criticism or the way that he dealt with these issues were so, you couldn't argue against them, so I think the way he described his songs pre-independence was that he was speaking a language that the colonial rulers could not understand. They were, he was talking to people at a level, calling them to, join the resistance without, metaphorically, as he does with almost everything he does. So, I mean, that was when I had a call from Amy about showing Miria for Independence Day, I thought, well, I wonder, because Shanda didn't get a very good release. Everyone's seen Miria, everyone knows about Miria, I think. But Shanda, I thought, because it deals specifically with, with the independence and the liberation struggle, and that back footage, I think that it kind of focused a little for a moment on the importance of.
Wow, wow, wow. Louise, how is it being married to a filmmaker like John?
I'm married to a filmmaker.
Yeah, how has it been?
Yeah.
Both of you being filmmakers in the same house. Do your creative juices run at the same time? Who supports who? How has it been like?
Well, we learned very quickly when we had children that we couldn't both do the same thing at the same time.
Okay.
So at that time, I was doing sound, but I kind of I wasn't really interested in sound. I was much more interested in the editing side, which was ideal because when his job's done, I take over the editing side and he kind of gets on to the next project as far as fundraising and stuff goes. So that worked out really well. And for me, I think editing is the most exciting part, other than, I don't know, shooting can sometimes be exciting, but sometimes it's pretty boring. But I didn't have to be on set all the time. So with young children, I, could still take them to school and pick them up and all of that. So it worked out pretty well. I think in our life, it was great to have this independence and sort of freelance style because we could be together as a family during holidays and just plan our schedules around those kind of things. So it wasn't kind of a 9-to-5 job, start editing when the kids go to bed or whatever.
Yeah.
But
things
yeah.
got really complicated because now our son is actually the filmmaker in the family. And in Tanzania, he kind of took over. Then it became really complicated because you got the producer, the director, and the editor, and family feud. I mean, really, it's complicated, but we somehow make it work.
Yeah, it's harder to have your son as your boss than your husband as your boss, I think, sometimes.
And he's definitely the one that's driving the process.
But I think that also shows that you have been such an inspiration, to have your son take over in the same direction that you guys had decided to go. So kudos to you guys. My next, I'm still, my chat is still open, guys. If you want any questions directly to John or Louise, remember this is supposed to be a discussion, which I'm turning into an interview, but I'm getting to learn a lot, and I'm also trying to put my job on the line just in case John and Louise might just say, Blessing, we want to do a film with you, So I'm doing my best to kind of like show them all my skills that I got, just in case I might be just chosen one day. I'm messing around. So.
Well, I'll jump in and say just two things, because John and Louise don't know me or really what we do here at all. And I just so appreciate them trusting, to jump into this community of folks. And I just really appreciated, Louise, you talking about your kids growing up in Zimbabwe and how they were in the government schools and felt so at home there. I have a 13-year-old daughter. She's been to Zimbabwe several times, and she did a short exchange at a boarding school. And although that experience was really hard for her, she now asks me weekly, like, when are we going to go stay there? Like, she wants to live there and be with her family there, her friends there. And, that is a goal of ours, is to don't tell anyone, to resettle in Zim someday.
Yeah.
People think I'm crazy. My Zimbabwean friends are like, what, you can't make a living there? Life is so hard. And I'm like, yeah. And there's something there that you have in Zimbabwe, in your culture and in your people and in your history, that Americans don't have. And that's a sense of community and a sense of how strong those family and neighborhood and kumusha bonds are. It's something that Americans don't have. And we need that, and we look to you for it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just to add on to that, our kids, when we moved to Tanzania, they came and worked with us there, and because of the language barrier there, it was a bit more difficult. But they just long to be back in Zimbabwe. And for me, and I think for him too, it was kind of the first place in our lives that we kind of really felt at home, because having grown up in India, we and white people in India, we were always an object of curiosity, and you felt like you were a foreigner always. But somehow in Zimbabwe, because it's a multicultural society, you kind of don't get that stigma immediately by looking at us that we're foreigners. I mean, we may open our mouths and everyone hears this American accent, but people really made us feel at home there. And I never felt like I was a foreigner. Sometimes I feel like a foreigner here in America, I have to say, but yeah. So it's a very special place in that way.
Wow. Wow, it's beautiful. I mean, yesterday we had another discussion just with the artists that have been performing what we called our little green room online, because I think one of the goals of this festival has been trying to bring all those little elements that you have in a physical festival, even online. So we had this little green room, and one of the young artists from Zimbabwe, she plays marimba. Her name is Lerato. She was still around. If she's still around, she can echo this. She said, it's amazing how foreigners have really appreciated our culture, loved our culture, seen the good in our culture, and it's also time now that our generation can also do the same. And it's special when you say that you felt at home. It just reminded me of that conversation that we had yesterday, and so as a Zimbabwean, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that's how you felt, and I hope my generation can carry that same pride for the generations to come. I was going to move to another question to you guys to say, what would be some of your advices you can give to upcoming filmmakers in Zimbabwe? Because you are an icon family that have done so much for our country, known and unknown, saluted and not saluted. On behalf of Zimbabwe, we salute you today. So, what would be some of your advice to upcoming filmmakers in Zimbabwe?
Well, okay. When we left Zimbabwe, it wasn't like we fled Zimbabwe. Things became complicated there, and as filmmakers, and especially as foreign, and maybe even more so as American foreign filmmakers, we saw kind of the writing on the wall. It was going to be difficult to continue doing the kind of work that we were doing. I had been up to Tanzania many times, and during my years in Zimbabwe, and there was something. Yeah. Anyway, we decided to go to Tanzania. We had a project that we could not complete that was already funded, and we went to Tanzania to complete it. We went to several countries to look, but and this was about the time that this local Tanzanian film industry was really emerging, called Tanzania, the Bongo film industry. And it was sort of based on the Nigerian model. And I really believe that's where it's at in many ways. What the Nigerians did was they produced poor, what we would call poor quality, but hugely popular films.
Okay.
And, and the reason being, which I think is that people want to they want to hear their nuances and things in films, apart from the actual camera work and the lighting and the polish, the production values that are much more important than those values. So what I'm seeing all over Africa is these little national industries that are basically making films for their own country, or whatever. The big advantage also, I think, in Zimbabwe is that it is, English speaking, and anything in English has got a bigger market internationally. When we made films like Miria and More Time Yellow, we weren't making these films for really international audiences and festivals and we really were making these specifically for youth in Southern and Southern Africa. And I think when you see the films, you can appreciate that. It's all local actors and local locations. There's no glitz and glamour and that kind of thing. So what I would suggest, and also, I mean, things have changed so dramatically now, even in the last decade, with consumption of media. You don't have to think about the big screen. We were making feature films partly because, for one thing, we wanted to reach huge audiences, mass audiences. And so looking around, I saw, we need to make films that people would pirate, basically, because if your film wasn't pirated in Africa, then no one was watching it. I mean, you can get a cinema, I think Nigeria, for example, set box office records. I mean, only Titanic, was it, or no, one of those, sold more tickets. But, that was 100,000 people with money in cinemas in cities. We knew that was not who we were trying to reach with Nigeria. But because of that exposure that I got, it would, everyone wanted to see it. And there was no distribution networks in place. So people pirated it. And we, in fact, didn't have a problem with that because we made this film for people to see. So anyway, anymore, what are young people how are they in Zimbabwe consuming media? Probably more a few minutes on cell phones and that kind of thing. So if you target your filmmaking to the reality of how it's being consumed by your audience, that would be one suggestion. Don't think about making, winning the Oscar award or whatever. Think about how you're going to reach, as many people as you can with the methods available.
I also think just, the Nigerian thing, I think that it's important also to tell real stories.
Okay.
The Nigerian films, and I'm generalizing, obviously there's, Nigerian films that aren't like that, but it's usually, a very wealthy family with a glitzy home, but, to tell these real stories that people can really relate to, as opposed to, something that's kind of beyond their reality, I think is important. And as well to, just get it done. It doesn't matter if it's the most fantastic film or, but to actually achieve making a film is a huge achievement.
Yeah, I disagree with Louise in many ways because, we have to look at filmmaking as an industry where people make money, make a living. Because out of that, I mean, like, look at America too. I mean, 90% of what's being produced in Hollywood is unwatchable as far as I'm concerned. But because it's such a huge industry, you have this phenomenal, quality of content. Many people just want to be entertained, I mean, even including us. I mean, we watch a lot of stuff we really shouldn't be watching maybe but from an industry point of view, I think it's important to make stuff that's popular. And if it's aspirational stuff of people, dreaming that they're, have swimming pools, but I also agree that, what comes out of that that's much more important is these really, really powerful stories of this, kinds of films that I really like to watch.
Yeah.
But I think the issue now is, everyone can be a filmmaker. Now, in our time, we were shooting on film, and it was incredibly expensive. It was incredibly elitist, to be a filmmaker in a way. I mean, now everyone can be with a mobile, with a smartphone and internet. You can make films. You can reach people. They don't care so much about the quality of and all that. They're looking for something that really captures their imagination. And yeah, so.
Well, it's so funny that you just said that last point, and Marriott actually said that in the chat box that she's a teacher and she hears most of her students saying, I'm a YouTuber and I'm gonna make it big, and that's just how it's been now. And you'll be shocked that there's so many kids that they shoot with an iPhone, them making something and already it's on 1 million views, just like that, because maybe it's the trending thing at that particular time. But I would really would love to, I would really would love to honor what you say, that it's also an industry that still needs to have its rightful discipline, its rightful things in place. And so I think for all the filmmakers that are watching now and that will watch this later, I think you've already helped them as well by saying, do stuff that you are sure that people would want to see. And what Louis said, that reality stuff, I agree with you. Not fake stuff. Like, tell me about the story of, I mean, I'm excited to see what filmmakers could do about COVID, because COVID has really been broad. Yes, it has been a worldwide pandemic, but each country's got a story to tell. If you talk about COVID in Zimbabwe, it's totally different with the COVID in the US, as much as the same thing. But the effect, the emotional stress, the mental pressure, the everything. So I think thank you for that point, that it's important that we talk about the reality issues. I'm just going to check with people watching. Anyone with any question for John and Louise? They are here for us, or something that you'd like us to discuss. Thank you, Mary, for sharing your story. Tatenda says, Blessing, I look forward to your film that will be produced by these two big filmmakers in 2022. So he's got faith. And thank you, Tatenda, for standing in my camp. And let's see what happens. I'm just going to throw them an email and let's see what happens. Lerato says, I think for many Zimbabweans, really, it's also the lack of resources. And I think I double agree with as a musician, as a content creator, for us to match. I know you have said Hollywood is producing funny things, but you'd be shocked that it's still a standard for Africa. It's still rather a standard for Zimbabwe as well. So for us to match that standard and pass it, yeah, the issue of resources is still quite special. What would be your comment around education and knowledge around a filmmaker? Is it something that you would recommend one to do, or do you think it's something that comes naturally with the person? What would be your...
You mean going to like
Going to film school.
Yeah, and looking at today, do you think it's still something that is relevant for one to go to a film school and get some knowledge? And
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I think whatever you can do, whatever you can afford to do, is fantastic. My experience, in Africa has been everyone is screaming for training, possibilities. Tanzania was a really interesting place because, it's a country of 50 million people, and everyone speaks Swahili. That is the language. There's another 150 million people in the region. So you have an audience of 200 million Swahili speakers, which, when the Nigerians came to Tanzania and they said, whoa, this is really something, this is like it's a huge market. It's a huge market, but it's also not a, very wealthy market. It's a very hard market to reach because there's a lot of impoverished people in rural areas and that kind of thing. But because of that, in fact, that was one of the reasons why we sort of chose Tanzania in a way, because when you produce something in Swahili, you've got a massive market, like
okay.
You produce in English. You produce in Shona, you're kind of limited in Ndebele. And as a filmmaker, we dubbed all of our films to Swahili and other languages, Shona and Ndebele, when we made them in English, but that's not really the same. But this is huge interest, youth, young populations in Africa, low problems with employment across the continent, of course. And I think film could be one of the real industries that could create jobs, a lot of jobs, as well as celebrate, culture and traditional stories. And, it's just a perfect match. There just aren't that many schools. And I know South Africa's got some good schools. There was a school, big effort in Zimbabwe when we were there with the UNESCO film training program. I don't know if that kind of didn't work out very well. But if you can get it, if you can afford to, but I don't think that you should be intimidated by that. The idea that I can't be a filmmaker because I haven't,
No, I mean, I think, in a lot of ways, I guess you're talking about directing and acting and all those things, in a lot of ways, either you have it or you don't. You know, there's definitely talent involved, and the talent is something that's in you whether you go to school or not. So if you can even like work on other people's films and you know, get the practical experience. I mean, I never went to film school, and our son, who you know, maybe I'm biased, but he's an excellent filmmaker, a director. He never went to film school. He actually went to sound engineering school. But you know, there's a lot to be said for just, like I said before, just doing it and learning through experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference between a filmmaker and a musician, for example, is that, you know, I mean, musical talent is very, I mean, it's a God-given talent. You know, in a way, I consider myself a failed musician. I just didn't have the, you know, I wanted to be a musician, but I just didn't have the patience and the, you know, the gumption.
John, you just had the wrong teacher. You should have come to me.
But filmmaking is a collaborative process. I mean, if you're not out there filming wild animals or something, you know, where you're going to spend your life waiting to catch the leopards mating and or whatever, you know, you've got to involve a lot of people in film productions, you know, and including musicians, you know, which is what I always loved so much. I think you'll see in all of our films, music really plays an important part. But then there's lighting, there's camera, there's art department, there's costumes, there's hair and makeup, you know, it's just a wonderful, but you have to be someone that really likes people and working with people, and a lot of ego. I mean, they're all artists, there are egos and, you know, all that stuff that comes with creativity that you're battling. And I think my role very quickly became that. I'm just like, now I used to be a filmmaker, now I'm just a producer, which is basically the engine behind it all, but I just try to put people together.
And put fires out.
And put fires out, yeah.
Wow. No, thank you. Thank you so much, John and Louise. We are going right into the end of our discussion, mainly because we have a concert that's premiering, two concerts that are premiering on Facebook and YouTube in the next few minutes. And this is our headlining concert of the festival and the tribute concert of our fallen heroes. And that's why today showing Shanda was so special for us, because it's tying the festival. And thank you for sharing all the knowledge that you shared with us. And just being available. You are people that are very important in the industry, but you made time for us, and we definitely do not take it for granted. So thank you so much. I think in closing, I just want to go through the room. If everyone could just tell me how they feel about independence, what independence means to them as we close down. And I got, of course, one more little question for John and Louise as we close. But what does independence mean to you, very quickly, as we close off? I'm going to start with my brother, Tatenda.
I saw that coming as you were talking. When I think of independence, now that I live in the United States, I think of it as a time to reflect my time in the US, my family, our history, our experiences as Black people. So it really connects me back to my people, the idea of community, the idea of identity. Yeah.
Where are you?
Well, I'm in Denver.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think identity is
key,
very much a key one. I've always struggled with my identity because I've lived all over the world and never felt really at home, except in Zimbabwe sometimes.
You're welcome to be fully Zimbabwean, believe me. Mary, I know you've been talking to me in the chat box, and then you hear the word independence and the joy behind it. What would be your comment?
Oh, wow. I have to be brief. I'm not a brief person, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is just celebrating who you are. And I don't necessarily follow borders. It's sort of a foreign idea, but I'm coming from an Alaska Native standpoint. You know, it's very hard to be independent here when, you know, we're native to the land here in America, but we're also independent in who we are. So celebrating who you are, that's how I see it.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. That was brief. Well done. And still deep. Lerato, I want you to answer the independence question, but also if you could just tell John and Louise how much the two films have impacted you as a Zimbabwean.
The two films, hello everybody, sorry. The two films have, I feel like our story is being spoken for us and what we've been through and who we are. It's a presentation of who we are, but then that is just a fraction because there is more to us. But then, however, they still speak mainly on who we are and what we're about as Zimbabweans and the situations that the general majority goes through and what they stand for. And then the independence. Independence to me, it's freedom. It's freedom. So freedom is we went through a lot and we still are, but then day by day, I see a lot of, what was the word? Zimbabweans are strong people and we still fight for our freedom each and every day. But then it means a lot also when we just remember this day, that this is the day that we were free. This is the day that, you know, we were celebrating about now identifying our own identity. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I was about to cut you because I know you can go on and very powerful and very deep, and independence means holiday to me. So thank you, Lerato, for sharing that. I'm just gonna ask Alison and Mark. We're just talking about independence and what you think and what you feel about it, together, tying with what John and Louise produced with Shanda and Neria, two special Zimbabwean films.
Yeah, hey everybody. I just when Lerato was talking about Zimbabweans have this strength, I also wanted to say resilience. That's a special kind of strength that I always associate with Zimbabwe. All the struggles and people remain positive and joyful when they're playing music, and resilience is the word that I really associate with Zimbabwean culture. The film was great. It's just so great to watch live Tuku, just tons and tons of it, just and cut to the interviews and then more live shows. And like Amy said, the footage of Independence Day, of the whatever ceremony they were having there on the day of independence was something I hadn't seen before. And yeah, it was really powerful. And I don't know, it just seems like it's been such a journey. Yeah, it's 40 years, but there've been so many, and I only watched it from afar, and I've really only been studying and playing the music for about 10 years, but there are just so many phases of that history, from the struggle for independence before 1980, and then 1980, all the hope, and then all the ways in which it went wrong, and continues to be turmoil. Every time there's an election, it's like, is this the moment when we can finally get on the right track? And there's disappointment, but there's still this resilience, and the hope survives. And so it's hard to watch that struggle, but it's heartening to see the resilience and the people continuing to move forward the best they can in very difficult times.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you. Very, very deep. Alison, do you want to say something, or you think he has covered everything?
Yeah, I was actually going to say that pretty much sums it all up. I feel very lucky to be a part of this community. I always have. I've been a part of this community for a while now, those of you who don't know me. But it's really, really powerful, like you said, to just watch this resiliency happen amongst the community. And that's something that I see in every single person from Zimbabwe that I've ever had the opportunity to talk to. It's just a really beautiful connectivity that happens between the Zimbabweans and everyone else that they meet. That's been my experience for sure. So yeah, thanks for allowing me the opportunity to share.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our discussion / interview. We got to know a lot about John and Louise today, and I just want to say thank you so much for opening up your lives, opening up your story and the backstory of how you've really produced this stuff. We appreciate you, and we are so grateful. Thank you for being part of our community. Now you are part of the Kutandara community. I was just about to say committee, but you're now part of the Kutandara community, and we'll share a lot of what we are doing, and we'll always be open to your advice, to your guides, especially in the filming direction and in anything creative, because you have walked the journey, and we really honor you. To everyone who came out today, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you. Remember to log into our Facebook and YouTube in the next 5 minutes as we bring to you the last two final concerts of this festival. We'd like to say a big thank you to all our sponsors who made this year's festival a great success. To those that have donated, thank you again for making the groundwork in Zimbabwe flexible and possible because of your donations. If you still want to donate, you can go on kutandara.org on our PayPal account, and you feel free to donate anything. Again, John and Louise, allowing us to have this film premiere on our festival. We don't take it for granted. Thank you so much. Everybody, stay safe, and let's keep in touch, and let's just keep on making music and keeping on making the memories that come out of all the films that we produce together, because you're one big family. Stay well, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Catch my film in 2022.
Saranega,